All right, hey guys. Like I said, my name's Tim, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about tonight. But before we get into it, I thought I'd introduce myself a little bit. I'm a sophomore from St. Louis, studying industrial engineering. And I realized that most people have no idea what industrial engineering is. And I'll let you know when I figure that out, because your guess is as good as mine. I am the sixth of 7 children, and if any of you come from big families, you know that parents typically stop caring after like the 4th child. So I'm like pretty low on the totem pole. And if you don't believe me, I am 20 years old and I've never learned how to ride a bike. So if any of you have a bike and want to teach a poor kid to ride it, I will buy the training wheels. I'm a sucker for a good story, and if you want to hear one, catch me afterwards, and I'd love to tell you about the time I accidentally killed a duck in Disney World. Anyway, so my plan tonight is just to throw some ideas at you guys, and you may agree or disagree with them, but really I just want to get us thinking. With that said, I'm going to hopefully be easy to follow, and hopefully at the end it'll all make sense. But I ask that you stick with me a little bit. So I want to begin by making a claim that I think is true for all of us in this room. We are all here because at some point in our life, we have found ourselves completely unsatisfied with where we're at. Whether it be your grades, your major, your friends, or your family, whatever it is, you found yourself asking, is this all life has to offer? And like I said, you can agree or disagree with me here, but I think this moment where we ask ourselves this question is one of the most important moments in our entire life. In this moment, we realize that maybe our life isn't as perfect as we all would like to think it is. And I would argue that as soon as these questions start bouncing around in our heads, they won't stop until we find that answer. Alyssa talked about it a little bit last week. We ask questions because we want answers. No one, I don't think anyone asks a question just for the sake of asking questions, right? Questions demand answers and we want the answers. So when we ask ourselves, is this all life has to offer? Whether we know it or not, we start looking for that answer. We start a journey throughout our entire life, and we begin to find things to answer that question, and we start to fill ourselves with things that we think will satisfy us. We think that if more people love us, then we'll be happy. We think that if more people follow our lead, then we will be happy. We think that if we get this position or this recognition, that we will be happy. And the hard part about this is that these aren't like bad things, right? Objectively, they're very good. But when we make these our sole focus in our entire life, then we feel empty. We end up feeling empty. And like I said, we all know this. This is nothing new. But this just starts a cycle that never ends, right? So once we start searching for something to fulfill us, and that doesn't fulfill us, we start searching harder. And we start searching harder. But eventually, we won't find anything, right? We all feel that emptiness. And like I said, I know this is nothing new, right? We all know what this feels like. We all know what this looks like. And no matter, no matter how many people you impress, no matter how good your resume looks, there's always that next thing, right? You always look ahead. You're never satisfied. And we all, it's very tiring and very draining, right? And this is nothing new. We all know this. But my point with this is that these questions and this journey has led us all here in this room tonight, right? We're all here for that same reason. We're all looking for that answer. So we know that God created us, right? But have you ever stopped and thought what that actually means? I know for me personally, I've never given it much thought. But I do know, Psalm 139 says, "You formed my inmost being, my very self you know." When they say you, they're talking about God. So God knows our inmost being, right? Because He made it. He Himself, the all-loving, all-courageous, all-knowing God, created the very part of ourself that makes us who we are. God placed the desires and the longings and the feeling of unsatisfaction in our hearts. That longing comes from Him because that longing is for Him. Like I said at the beginning, agree or disagree, but God longs for us infinitely more than we could ever long for Him. He yearns to make His home in our hearts. And I love that word yearns because it has such a desperate connotation. He is desperate to satisfy our hearts. His yearning was so intense that He took on flesh to bring Himself to us. He didn't just stand idly by and hope we figured it out on ourselves, right? Like, we know that Jesus won our salvation, but He did it as a human. He knows the suffering of this world because He was in the world and He felt it. He knows exactly how disgusted we can be with our lives sometimes. And He searches for us the way that we search for all of those other things that we try to fill ourselves with, right? And even if we know that, like, we all know that Jesus came to give Himself to us, somehow we all are still unsatisfied and unfulfilled as we go on, right? We find ourselves unsatisfied even with that knowledge. And that's because Christ will never force Himself onto us. He will never force us to come to Him. That's why He came to us. And even though He so desperately wants us to let Him invade our hearts, He will never do that without our permission. He lets us choose. And most of the time, what do we choose? We choose to, block Him out. We build these walls, we kick Him out, and we close the door. We throw everything that we can find and place it in our hearts where He belongs. And yet, Christ never misses a beat, right? He sits and He waits. So in a few moments, we're going to begin adoration. And like Chris said, we have the awesome opportunity and a few awesome priests here to hear your confessions, our confessions, I guess. I'm a sinner too. But so I ask that if you feel called to the sacrament of reconciliation, please take advantage of the opportunity. But in a few moments, Jesus Christ Himself is going to walk into this room. And as much as He wants to, He's not going to force Himself onto us. He's not going to barge into our hearts without permission. He's going to sit right here, literally on the doorsteps of our hearts, and He's going to wait. Love is not forceful, and if God is love, God will wait. So I'll be completely honest. This is a very short talk, right? Because anything I can say doesn't really matter considering Jesus is walking into the room in a couple minutes. I can't, what a following act, you know? I can't, I'm not a good opening act. But I'll be honest, by the time I stop speaking, most of the people in this room will have no idea what I just said. You'll all forget it. And that is totally fine, I don't care. I just hope that you guys, I just hope that you all take this one thing away. That we have two incredible opportunities tonight that we all overlook all the time, and that includes myself. We have the opportunity to let Christ into our hearts. We have the opportunity to let Christ into our brokenness and into our frustrations, into our joys and hopes and dreams. But it's up to us. We have to let Him in. We have to be the ones to let Him make His home in our hearts. So here's my challenge for all of you. Whether you have let Christ satisfy your desires your entire life, or you've barricaded Him off so much that He's never even had the opportunity to knock, please open the door. Please give Him permission to make His home in our hearts. Please kneel.